Welcome to Unlocking the Parenting Code. I'm Kathy, and this is a space where we dive into real-life parenting stories. Because let's face it, raising kids today can feel like trying to crack a complicated code. Together we'll explore the ups and downs, share insights, and swap tips that make this journey a little smoother. So grab a cup of coffee, relax, and let's unlock the parenting code together.
Today, I'm excited to introduce Kim Nave. Kim is a homeschooling mom of 8 with 2 children still living at home. She's a licensed therapist and a certified life coach. Kim's journey as a parent spans over 33 years, and she now lives in the mountains of Tennessee with her 2 youngest children, including a daughter who faces mental health challenges and behavioral concerns. Kim opens up about her unique path, starting her advanced education at 43 to better understand her daughter's struggles, becoming a therapist, and currently pursuing a doctorate. Kim, welcome to the show.
Very much for having me.
Kim, let's start with your personal parenting story and what challenges you faced, how you navigated the situation, and what you learned. It's likely that someone listening to this episode will hear something in your story that helps them along the parenting road.
All right. So like you said, I became a mom 33 years ago, just celebrated my daughter's 33rd birthday last week. Um, she was the only girl until my second girl was born when she was 16. So 5 boys in between, and then a boy bringing up the caboose. Um, at 17, my oldest daughter started using drugs and kept it hidden. We didn't use drugs in our house. We didn't drink. We went to church every Sunday, every Wednesday. We did that whole thing. And we just didn't have addiction within our household. My grandfather had been an alcoholic, but not somebody that my daughter had interacted with a lot. So she started using drugs. She came to us when she was about 18 and shared that she was using drugs. She also had some mental health issues that had started to show up a little bit before she started using the drugs and got worse the more drugs that she used. So what that looked like in the house was that she would get into verbal rages where she would scream at people. And it was very chaotic. So after she had told me that she had started using drugs, she had tried to go off the drugs and had a psychotic break. And that scared her to the point where she wanted to stay off drugs, at least for a while. And she started therapy and invited me to go with her. And at that time, they asked if I had any questions. And I said, how do she gets in these verbal rages. How do I support her and protect myself and my kids? And they said, duck and run for cover. And I was like, that's not an answer.
Wow.
So that was when I went back to school. I was about 43 at that point, and I decided to go back to school to save the world myself. And it's been an interesting journey. 6 of my kids have graduated from homeschooling. Like you said, I have 2 more at home. And now my youngest daughter, who is now 16, has started showing very similar symptoms to my oldest daughter with mental health symptoms. So that challenge kind of brought me around full circle because I went back to school to do therapy to help families like ours who had a child with a mental health issue that they just didn't know what to do with. And in the meanwhile, got very interested in trauma and helping people to heal from trauma, starting with myself. I'm my own first client. And that was really, that's the little path that I took to come full circle back again to helping parents with kids with intense emotions. Because what I've discovered along the way, having faced the challenges with my oldest daughter with no clue what I was doing, and being now facing the challenges with my youngest daughter, having healed significant healing from my own traumas that I experienced. It's a whole different ball of wax. And I am learning, and it is a process. I am learning every day how to hold space for her, um, without my own trauma playing into what we're dealing with in that moment.
Wow, that's I wasn't quite aware of your whole story, and there's two things really that kind of jump out. And the first thing that is a repetitive little gem that seems to come out all the time, myself included, that a lot of us, something happens in our parenting world, and it sets us on a path that we hadn't planned on. And it's really driven by this really strong desire to understand and support our own children first, and then it spreads out into a wider world. And I really do think there's absolutely nothing more powerful than a mom on a mission. Like, it's just, that's part of what this podcast is about. I think there's such wisdom when we have challenges. So there was a question in my mind as you were talking, and maybe just for a little backup first. You have 8 children and you chose to homeschool all of them.
Yes.
And
Yes.
can you tell me how you came to that kind of a decision?
My oldest daughter actually went to public school for kindergarten and first grade, and we started having some issues with her teacher that got to a point. I'll just share the issue. She was sent home from school saying that she had lice. And so I treated her and her brothers. We washed all the stuff. Everybody did the lice shampoo and all of that. I sent her back to school. They sent her home again. They called my grandmother to pick her up instead of me, but they sent her home again. So in the meanwhile, she was missing out on field trips and activities that her class was doing because they kept sending her home. I ended up having to take her to the doctor, who said that she had nothing. She did not have lice. She did not have nits. She didn't have anything. Sent her back to school. He had sent a note with her. The school tried to send her home again and said that her note said that she didn't have lice. It didn't say she didn't have nits. And so I called the doctor's office and I was like, I need some help. And he said, what's the phone number? I'll call the principal myself. And so that kind of ended that. She finally just gave up and let my daughter stay in school. But throughout this process, the frustration was so intense for all of us. My daughter started asking to homeschool. And I was actually probably 5 months pregnant with my fourth child. And I was like, yeah, no, I can't do that. And she kept begging and kept begging. And she is very much like that. She gets something in her head and that's it. She's on a roll. She's not giving up until she gets it. And so I started doing some research, and I took it to my ex-husband and I said, this is what she wants to do. I don't think it's a good idea. And he said, you know what? I think this is why all this is happening. That's what we need to do. And so she finished out second grade, and we started homeschooling that summer because the baby was due in like October. So we tried to get a jump on things, and we've just never looked back.
Wow. So the because you have challenges with your eldest and your youngest, your girls, and sometimes that's more difficult to uh, recognize or get those initial red flags when it's your world. Like, that's one of the things that you can see in a classroom, that it might take longer or less time. Hard to say, but so you've been able to tap into that. There were some concerns, some issues, and then follow through on that. So when your eldest daughter, like, did she leave home when she started having these problems? Like, did she go off to college, or was she still
She
living at home?
she moved out at 18. As soon as she graduated from high school, she moved out and moved in with friends that were using drugs. So
Yeah.
yeah, that was a rough road. That was a very rough road.
One of the things I was going to talk about later actually was just that. It was kind of like you have the wisdom that maybe a lot of moms who are listening to this right now, they don't have the elder children yet. So they're still in the throes of those younger years where you really do have more control, more influence in your children's world. And I know I found the same thing. Like I found when our son started university and those 4 years and the 20s, actually it was the 20s, and it was I that was probably the most challenging of the whole child rearing time because they're adults, or physically they're recognized by society as adults, especially for boys. They are not adults. And that expectation really shouldn't be there. But I know when our son was struggling, one of the things that I had to make a decision about was, is it more important for me to be trying to convince him to go down a different road? Or is all I can do right now, because we've done the groundwork, is it just to listen, to be there, to keep those lines of communication really open, really deep? And it's not that I was condoning the behavior, but just trying to make sure he knew that we were always there. And, that the phrase unconditional love is a little fluffy, but that was the time that I really got it. It has to be unconditional. How is it for you? Like, did you have any of the same kind of feelings?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have jokingly said I would rather potty train all 8 of my kids at once than have young adults.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think that you bring up a really, really good point, and it is the unconditional love, and it's validating them
Mhm.
in that moment. And that has been something that I have really been working on doing with my 16-year-old that I just really did not understand with my older daughter.
Yeah.
And so the validation, it has to make sense to me, right? And so the place where I would struggle was that she would share something that I absolutely didn't agree with, and I felt like if I try to validate her, then I'm telling her that she's right. And that's not what validation at all is at all. Validation is saying, I hear you. I hear that you're saying that you see this way, you feel this about this situation. I hear what you're saying. And that's where it ends.
Yeah.
I don't agree with it. I don't disagree with it, but she feels heard. And unfortunately, I think I figured that out a little bit too late because our relationship continues to deteriorate at this point. Um, but I think that is one of the most important things to do is
I
to
think,
validate.
yeah, I agree completely. It's actually interesting. There's a word in Japanese that is exactly that. And a lot of times it's used in conflict because you'll have someone coming at you and that's the answer. The word means I hear you. There is no acceptance or agreement or anything. It's just I hear you. And I think it's a very, you know, that's a very important part of it. It's not easy it's not easy. I do agree. I think the 20s are and late teens are the most trying times. I remember asking our son after he seemed to be going on the outside of that road, you know, just talking about how difficult it was. And just asking for, like, I'm very reflective, so I wanted to understand better. Like, could I have done better or could I have supported better? And the one thing he told me, which I thought was really interesting, he said, I just need you to understand for some reason I had to go through this and trust that I would be okay on the other side. And I thought, wow, that's difficult. The trust and surrender thing is difficult, but I also was really pleased that he could articulate it. And for anyone who's listening to this is thinking, oh my God, look, the worst is to come. That's not true either. And
No.
it it's part of the life experience. But I know for us, like when our son got closer to the end of the 20s, and then actually when he moved into his early 30s, it was like, oh, I've got my boy back.
Mm,
And almost like, it was worth going through everything. Um, so it's not all doom and gloom, but
correct.
it's a challenge that I think if parents are more aware, because sometimes we think they're adults, so we kind of back off, or we continue to try to monitor and control their world, which usually doesn't work out well.
And that control piece can come from our own experiences, traumatic experiences that we have experienced. And one of the things that I noticed when I did my own trauma healing, my own program for myself, back in 2021, was that it drastically changed my relationship with my kids
Mm.
because I could see them for who they were and not through the lenses of my or the lens of my own issues, my own traumas, my own challenges that I had faced, the mistakes that I had made. I could take that lens away and see my child for who each of my children for who they were. And that drastically changed our relationship to where um, they felt more safe to share themselves with me, things that they had in the past been afraid to share because they didn't know what version of mom they were going to get. Now they could be open with me. In fact, I won't go into any detail, but one of my boys called me one day and said, "Hey mom, I have a question for you." And I said, "Okay, shoot, go for it." And the question that he asked me, all I could think of was, "Oh my gosh, I cannot believe you asked your mother that question."
Yeah, yeah,
But it also spoke to me that I had, because I was healing, I was creating that safe space for my kids that whatever it is, mom's there. And that is what I want my kids to know. That is my biggest heart's desire for my children, is to know I don't have to agree with it. I don't have to like it. I don't have to think that you're right, that you're doing the right thing. And I can still be here for you.
yeah.
And that's where that validation has been so huge.
Yeah, I think we're living in a time where it's more, there's more of an awareness of how if you do some of that inner work yourself, it's really going to positively impact all your relationships. So that's kind of an exciting time to be in where that's, you know, you can kind of pinpoint some things and then resolve them yourselves. And it really does impact everything. Okay,
Absolutely.
Kim, I wanted to ask you because, especially in the world that we're living in this generation, it is not common to have 8 children. So, did you plan this, or were you going for a baseball team, or what was your thinking?
I planned 7
Okay,
and I lost count.
too busy with the 7.
Yes, I guess so. And I say that, and I do not want to give the impression that I feel like the eighth one was a mistake. He is absolutely
Yeah,
not. My he is my most sensitive, my happiest, my funniest child. And I absolutely, being divorced, there have been times where I've been like, why didn't I just divorce him sooner? And then I wouldn't have had all of these kids. And then I go, okay, so which one would I not have? And what would life be like without that one or those few or whatever, depending on when we had gotten divorced? And I can't imagine life without, even just without one of my children.
yeah,
They all add something, even the ones that are challenging the tar out of me right now.
yeah.
They all add something absolutely amazing to my life that I just would not want life without.
A lot of people today, a lot of people today are, even if they would like to have a family, they are really concerned about, can we afford to have a family? Can we, you know, Like we are living in a different world because we can work from home now. So that's a whole different opportunity that we have. But it often is finances for people who would like to have a larger family. But I kind of think the same way that, you know, if you're blessed with children, that, you'll work it out somehow. So I'm from a big family. There are six of us growing up, and I was right in the middle. So one of the things I wanted to, it's usually a topic I talk about with parents is discipline,
Mhm.
because it is the most prominent problem that parents seem to talk about: misbehavior and discipline. And some of the things that parents have told me that have multiple children, it's a it's quite interesting how different people deal with different things. So I was thinking about it before we got on, and I was thinking, okay, my mom had six kids and it was a traditional family. So my father went out and worked. She was home with the kids. And there, like, I don't ever remember anyone getting a spanking, or like there was almost nothing, in discipline wise. But my mom had a wooden spoon that was on a hook in the kitchen, and she never used it. And I can remember maybe once where she actually took it off the hook. So, but it was kind of like that was the signal to us. If mom said, "Do I have to get that spoon out?" It was like this unsaid message. Okay, we better get a little bit under control here, or it's not going to turn out well for anybody. So, if someone asked me how discipline was handled in a family of six with one parent really doing the disciplining, that was it for us. How did it look like in your family?
I will be honest, when the kids were younger, like in diapers, there were some spankings. Um, After that, like your mom, it was more the threat of. Um, and my funny story is riding in the car. If it was just me and the kids, and the boys were sitting right behind me, and they would get into it, I would take a shoe off and just kind of swing it back. I didn't very rarely, if ever, hit anything, and if I did, there was no power because my arm's behind me. But it kind of became the joke among my kids that if mom takes her shoe off, you better run.
Yeah.
So as once I became a therapist, I was working on getting my license, and I worked in a boys group home. And because I was a therapist, I was the safe space, and I had really good relationships with the kids in the house. And my daughter went through a period of time where she was clean, and I had asked her to come in and do a group session for me. And so she came in and she talked to the boys about her experience. And then at the very end, she said, "Oh, and before I go, I just want to tell you something. Do not mouth off to my mom. She will not hesitate to throw a shoe at you." And I was like, I'm just kind of sitting there. My boss is sitting there, and I'm like, I've never thrown a shoe at any of the kids. I swear I've never done that. But it was funny enough for the boys to all turn around and look at me and kind of giggle. And I guess it was a week or so later, they were all sitting in the day room. They were playing games. They were being good. Nobody was acting out. And I had these little black flat shoes on that I could pull off and on super easy. So I didn't say a word. I just walked through the day room with my shoe in my hand. And it was hilarious to hear the boys go, "She's got her shoe." No. So there's my funny story.
Well, and sometimes, I think humor is something we don't pull into parenting enough. And humor and magic, I think those two things sometimes can diffuse situations and let us have a better outcome.
Yeah. Yeah.
So another thing that I thought you would have wisdom in is, so when I think back to when I was raising our son, which is 31 years ago, and I think about children that are being raised today, there are some major differences that seem to be impacting a lot of parents. So you have a wealth of information from when you first parented your first child at 33 to still parenting a child in their teens now. So as a parent, like as the mom, Like how have you adapted to, what's going on in society that is changing the world for children? And how have you been able to kind of adapt like your parenting to go along with that, but still keeping, your morals and values intact? Like how are you balancing it all?
I'm learning as I go, in all honesty. And really, for me, it's about connecting with my kids and listening to them, and and noticing the things and having conversations. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that's changed is I am less, I always get these mixed up. I'm less authoritarian and more authoritative
Yeah.
than I was when my older kids were little. Um, and my older kids tease me about it. Man, if I'd have done that,
Mm-hmm.
they get away with so much more. Do they really get away? Do they really get away with it? And they're like, well, not really. I mean, you just do it differently. But there is a lot more focusing on strengths, learning how to speak to my children. Um, I can't get away from the validation. That has just been a huge insight for me over the last couple, literally the last couple of months. And just being able to ask them, instead of asking them what's wrong, asking them what happened or what's going on, because that invites a story where what's wrong and it kind of gives you the impression that there's something that shouldn't be going on. So when I ask them what happened or what's going on, it invites a story for them to share with me. This is what I'm thinking. This is what I'm feeling. This is what I see going on. And again, my own healing, which keeps me less reactive for the most part. I am still human and not perfect, but for the most part, less reactive. They have that safe space to talk where I don't, my older kids certainly didn't have that when they were younger.
Yeah. I think when we're really curious and when we understand the power of the words that we're using, um, those two components can really change everything. Because if we're really curious, then we're not making the judgments. We're wanting to hear that story. And if we understand how to say that so that they can hear us, so that they're not putting up these walls. So really communication is maybe one of the most critical things. Because if you get the communication fairly smooth, then your connection is deep enough. So yeah.
Absolutely. Um, and I think with the listening and asking them what's going on and allowing them, giving them that space to share that story, also being able to say, and this has been something that I've really had to work on with my daughter. You've shared this with me, and I have a lot of emotions coming up. So I need a minute because I cannot interact with you without reacting, which is not what I want to do right now. I want to respond. So I need that moment. So let's take a break. Let's come back in 30 minutes or an hour and let's continue at that point. Um, that has been huge for me as well to get to that place, not just with my 16-year-old, but with my other kids as well. That, what you shared with me has brought up some emotions. And it's okay that it's brought up the emotions. They're not your fault, they're my responsibility. So let me work on that so that I can come back and we can have a better conversation.
When parents ask me about time out for younger children, um, that what you've just said is my answer completely. I don't believe in time out for children, but I certainly believe it for the adults, and it can be just the most valuable situation to just say, I need a timeout. So,
Yeah.
all right, something that I know from doing my little research about you is that you have a strong interest or um, experience connected around children's emotional development. So things like self-esteem and resiliency and all those things, I think, are crucial to how our children view themselves in the world that they're living in. So what were some of the strategies that you used to support the emotional growth in your children? Like, did you focus on like specific guidelines or to help you do this, or like what was your compass when you were trying to do this?
I can say I totally blew it up with my older kids. It wasn't something I had for myself. So it wasn't something I could give them. And I would honestly say that it's been in the last 3 years as I have begun to heal that I have really begun to work on helping them with loving themselves, with having self-esteem, with feeling confident in themselves, and watching how I speak to them is the biggest thing. Um, my my relationship with my mother was very rocky. She was very controlling. She was very negative. She was very demanding and critical. And that was really the mother that I became up until my healing. And since then, being able to recognize that tendency in myself and to take that time out, like we were just talking about, um, so that when if my son is working on school and he's just not getting it, rather than reacting, what is wrong with you? Aren't you listening to me? Why can't you do it the way I'm telling you? To take that step back and say, okay, let me just take a breath. This is new for both of us. This is the first time I'm teaching you this. Yes, I've taught your siblings this, but this is the first time I'm teaching you this. So what does make sense? And that's been a big piece of it too, whether it's a math problem or a life situation. What does this look like for you? What does it feel like for you? What are you seeing in this? And really, again, going back to the curiosity and being able to um, affirm that in them, that, there might be a couple things that we maybe could improve on. And for the most part, and that's that key, and is key, because when we say but, it knocks out the rest of the sentence that we've already said, right? So there may be some things to improve on, and these are the things that you're doing well. And how can we build on these things?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, I'm going to go back to a little bit of the nitty-gritty stuff. Again, like I think you have a wealth of wisdom with a large family. So I was wanting to know how you deal with things like independence and responsibility with a large family, like some of the responsibilities that the children would have, or like my mom used to have a chart that she put over the sink that, the days of the week for that week, who was washing the dishes, who was sweeping the floor, so that we, saw it was fair and organized, and we knew who was doing what when. What did it look like with your family as far as responsibilities and instilling that independence, and kind of we're in this together as a family, so we have to pull together?
Yeah, that that's another funny story for me. I had 4 children at the time. We were pretty new into, I think it was our second year of homeschooling, and I went to a homeschool convention where this woman had 11 kids, and she developed her own system, and she called it Managers of Their Homes. And she had this beautiful chart that had every person in the house scheduled for every 30 minutes. Each person was doing something either by themselves or with somebody else for 30 minutes at a time. And she had an egg timer. And when the egg timer went off, they shifted to their next thing. So my left brain got very, very happy over that. And so I bought the book. I went home and I read it. And she had put one of those lovely, beautiful little charts in there. And I created my chart and I bought an egg timer. We had everybody on the chart. Mind you, there was only 3 of us that can read, 4 if my ex-husband was home. And so we would start the day out. We would get up, we would eat breakfast, and we would do chores, and then we would do school. And we were pretty good up until then. But after school was done, then it would be you're with this person, you're with this person, and this is what you're doing at this time. And so when the egg timer would go off, the 3 of us would converge on this chart, try to figure out who we were supposed to be with and what we were doing, and then run off to do that thing. It lasted a week before we tried to kill each other because it was way too structured for our family. But what I did learn out of that was I could take what was already working and I could create a routine out of that. And so we did have a chore chart. This is this kid, and this is what this kid is responsible for. And I had weekly, bi-weekly, and monthly on there. So everybody knew what their chores were and what they had to do. And the routine was you get up, you eat breakfast, you do your chores, you do school. After school, it was still a little wonky. We usually had a quiet time where really mom could get the break, where the kids would go read or quietly do something. Babies were napping at that point. And then in the afternoon, we would spend some time together. And that was the routine we followed for a lot of years. And after I got divorced, my oldest son had already moved out of the house and he came to stay with me for a couple of days. And my then, I think he was 13 or 14-year-old kid, I came home from work. His chores weren't done, his homework wasn't done. And I was like, dude, what happened? And he goes, I didn't know I had to do chores and homework. And before I could say a word, his older brother went, dude, you get up, you eat breakfast, you do chores, you do homework. I don't even live here anymore, and I know that. So it really, really revolved around the routine that we had established.
Yeah. I think often, and especially with boys, that sense of routine and understanding what the expectations are make their world a little bit safer. Like they know exactly what the expectation is. So it can be
Yeah.
a very, very positive thing. Another area that I also like talking to you has brought back so many different memories of being a child in a really large family. And so one of the things, again, I hear from parents who have several children is about sibling rivalry. And I know because there were six of us, especially whichever ones were kind of close together, there could be some wild times. Like I would think, from thinking of my mom especially, that would have been the most difficult part about parenting, would have been the rivalry and the conflict that would come up between siblings. So what did that look like with you?
Um, I was an only child growing up. So the first fight that my oldest daughter and oldest son got into, I literally laughed because I had never experienced that before and I didn't know what to do with it. And my ex-husband jumped in and of course he fussed at me for just laughing and I was like, I mean, I literally did not know what to do. Didn't That wasn't a thing for me. Um, we had neutral corners at times. We had you've got to go to your room and you go to your room and when you want to come out and you can talk about it, then that's cool. The biggest, I think, rivalry would be that was caused more by outside influences. My parents very much favored my oldest daughter, and so the boys felt undervalued. And so having to balance that because my daughter, because there were five boys at home, felt undervalued at home. And so trying to find that balance was challenging for sure. Um, and really it was trying to model with my ex-husband, trying not to fight in front of the kids. Again, we didn't always nail it, but being able to have conversations and to inspire conversations and to mediate if need be. So, what do you say happened? What do you say happened? If we can't come to an agreement on this, then we've got to agree to disagree. Um, and I mean, that was really conflict resolution in our house, is just learning to find ways to either agree or agree to disagree and to let that be okay.
Yeah, I think there's more tools out there today than there was a while ago. In our family, I don't ever remember my mom and dad saying, let's sit down and, you and your sister and we will talk about. I don't ever remember ever, not even once. But my dad was an ex like his hobby sport was boxing. And he had two pairs of, smaller boxing gloves that hung on the steps going down to the basement. And if two of the siblings would be starting to get a little bit unruly, he would just look at us and say, "Put on the gloves, go downstairs." And it was just kind of like it worked because
Yeah.
usually it diffused that emotion because you were getting permission to safely release that anger. And I don't ever remember putting on the gloves unless he was playing with us, like play fighting with us. But that was his tool. There was no talking about it. It's like if you can't work this out yourselves, put the gloves on and go downstairs. And I don't know that that would ever work today, but it was kind of today we have more of an understanding, I think, and I'm not sure what the pluses and minuses are, but we do tend to say to our kids, like try to give them the strategies and the skills to be able to talk out or get over whatever the issue is. Something else I would like to ask you is, as your children are getting older, like it's the same thing, especially from about the time of, well, through adolescence, I guess. Often our kids are, because they're wanting the independence and they start to pull away from us. What kind of things did you do or keep in your mind during, especially during those times, so that you stayed connected with your child?
It was really rough with my older kids. Um, my daughter, again, she started using drugs, and that connection just, it was awful. It was on again, off again as she would get clean, and then she'd go back, and she'd get clean, and she'd go back. Um, my ex-husband and I started having trouble when the next few kids were in their teen years. Um, and I can honestly say I know that I did not do a very good job with them, staying connected to them, because I was just in survival mode at that point. Um, and I have had conversations with them since the divorce, since I've started working on myself and healing myself. I've had conversations. I have apologized. We have worked through some of the resentment that they felt towards me for kind of checking out, because that was literally what I had done. And so we've been able to have those conversations, and for the most part have been able to settle some challenges that we had been facing. Um, my 16-year-old at this point, so the three boys above her, um, they just kind of, it just kind of flowed for us. When it was time for them to go, they went, and it was okay, and it was very relaxed. Um, and I didn't really feel necessarily stressed about them trying to figure out who they were and to do their own thing. Not that there weren't moments, but for the most part, those three boys were pretty easy. Um, my daughter, because of the mental health issues that she has been significantly more challenging. Um, because the goal of independence that she has, which she should have at 16, is also influenced by some very serious mental health issues.
Yeah.
And that's not something that she is able to grasp. So there has been um, a lot of push and pull going on.
So I know as a parent, when things are really tough, um, it's just really easy to start to sink yourself in overwhelm, in guilt, in fear. Like it can be very, very emotional for challenging, very emotionally challenging when things are really rough. What did you do, or what and do to help keep yourself grounded? Because these are things that, all parents face at some point or another, and we all have different, strategies. What did you do?
Um, my personal favorite is deep breathing using my diaphragm. Um, and that's to get me in this moment. I just have to get to this moment. If I can get in this moment right here and right now, then I can have the clarity of mind to choose from other tools that I have. And there's a couple of favorites there. One of them is cutting cords,
Mm.
whether it's with a child, with my ex-husband, with my current husband. It's not cutting the relationship, but it's cutting those cords of the things that I'm carrying that are theirs that are not mine to carry. So giving those things back to them, taking back my stuff and cutting those cords so that that relationship has more freedom in it, that I'm not weighed down by their stuff and they're not weighed down by mine. Um, and my other favorite one is a kind of a meditative state, I would guess would be a good way to explain it, where I'm just really connecting with myself and asking myself, what do I need in this moment? What can I give myself? Not that I need from another person, because I don't have control over somebody else. I have control over me. So what do I need? Do I need to tell myself I love you? You're doing a great job. I'm proud of you. And giving myself those things that I need in that moment. That's
So,
been most helpful.
are these the same tools that you were able to use in the beginning of your parenting, or are these tools that have come from you doing your own work?
This is what I have learned from doing my own work. I
So
had
what
no,
did you do? What did you do before? Because like I know, different people react different ways. I know, and when we have done our work on ourselves, then we can end up at just a great place. Like I remember when our little guy was 2 and I was really, really upset with my husband and I ran away with my child overnight, told him where I was going to a nice hotel. But I mean, that's not my strategy. I would never, I don't run away from my problems. But at that time, brand new child, everything, and stressed and overwhelmed. And that was what I did at the time to try to pull myself back in so I could be the parent and partner that I wanted to be. So when you were a young mom, multiple children, how did you how did you keep yourself when it was overwhelmed, when you were at the end of your rope? Like, what did you do? Did you go out for a walk? Did what was it at that time before you did the work on yourself?
I cried.
Yep. Yeah.
I cried. And that was the only thing I knew to do.
Yeah.
Um, my ex-husband worked a lot of hours. Um, and especially when my kids were younger, I couldn't just go out for a walk without taking them with me. And if
Yeah.
they were the reason I was feeling overwhelmed, then I wasn't getting anywhere. I did a lot of crying.
Did you do
Um,
it in the bathtub? Like so many women, because that's the only time, sometimes, especially when you got young kids, it's the only time you're by yourself. So the bath itself becomes your therapeutic space.
Mine was just mostly anywhere in the bathroom or my bedroom. I would
Yeah.
just close the door and just give myself that space. And if you would have asked me back then what I was doing, I probably wouldn't have described it in the same way. It's really what I've learned over time, looking back at it, that's what I was doing. I was just finding the only way that I could release it.
Well, and that's
Um,
why I think it's really important for parents to be able to talk to other parents because sometimes we just see that at the end of the road that looks pretty darn good and sometimes we think well we're not there and not even close but so we're not doing such a good job and it's kind of understanding it really is a process and it really is about continuous reflection working on yourself working on your relationships so in that light what would be your definition of a successful parent?
I think a successful parent is one who can acknowledge they're not going to nail it every time. And yet they keep going, they keep trying, they keep doing the work, and they keep giving themselves grace.
That's a beautiful answer. Thank you.
That was awesome. I don't know where it came from, but it was awesome. I thought, oh,
Inspired.
here. Yes, it was very inspired. I
Well,
love it.
that's also, that's validation that we do have everything we need inside. We just have to trust that, to tap
Yep.
into it and let it come out. Okay, so we're just about done with this episode, and I've got two final things. So the first question is for fun, and it is, what would the title be for a movie about your family life, and what would the movie summary or synopsis be?
Oh, the movie, I think the title would be Calm in the Chaos. And it would be a synopsis would be one family's journey of returning to calm whenever chaos breaks out, because it will happen.
Yeah.
Constant. It will happen.
Yeah. Good show. All right. You don't have grandchildren yet, do you?
I do. I have 10.
You have 10 grandchildren. Holy smokes, I didn't know that. Wow. What's their range in age?
The oldest one is, I believe he just turned 14, and the youngest one is 7 months old.
Holy smokes. Do they all kind of live in your area or some further away?
4 of them live about 4 hours away, and I don't get to see them often. The rest of them live pretty close. 1, 2, 3, 5 of them are inherited. So they're not biologically
Yeah.
my grandchildren, but they are my grandkids. And I don't see a difference.
Yeah.
I don't treat them any different. They're my
Wow.
baby.
Well, I guess that's the advantage of having a large family, is that you end up having a large, grand family too. So, well, congratulations on that. So then the last question that I ask everybody, and I'll still ask you because I don't know if you had this conversation when that first grandchild was being born. But the question is to picture yourself sharing some wisdom with your child when they are first going to start their family. And if you did it, you can share that, but you don't need to, because you are in a different space now than you were then. So what would be your words of wisdom?
Be your own kind of parent. You don't have to be the parents you grew up with. You can be yourself, and that's perfectly fine. I'd also say give yourself grace. You're going to make mistakes, you're going to blow it, but there is research that says you only have to get it right 30% of the time.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Kim, thank you so much for just being really open and sharing your experiences and your challenges and your successes as you've been moving on. It's been really interesting, and I think that there's a lot of things here that people will be able to hear and take out of it, and so I thank you very much for your insights and your wisdom.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
If you're a parent raising a boy in today's complex world, be sure to explore sonhoodcoaching.com. You'll discover expert guidance and support designed to help you unlock your full parenting potential. As Amelia Gambetti says, this job is too difficult and too beautiful to do alone. Together we can explore this adventure and discover the magic of raising boys.